Musket Man, and I am back for episode 4 of Gun Table Talk. Now, I apologize I didn't get to a video last week. I actually forgot. I forgot that I didn't even make a video, so shame on me, but I'm back again for episode 4 of Gun Table Talk. And if you've been seeing my last posts, the last 2 posts were about the Walker, and I thought, well, what a great opportunity to just go ahead and talk about it. So without further ado, let's continue episode 4 of Gun Table Talk and talk about the Walker. All right, guys, so again, like I just said, talking about the Walker. So before I can get into it, I need to go a little bit further back into history before the Walker, which would have been the Colt Patterson. Now, anybody knows anything about history in my previous videos is the Colt Patterson was basically the first revolver or repeating arm to come on the scene that, and couldn't really say it was a success, but it worked. It was something to work off of, and it's what got Colt into the gun business. So up until Colt got his patent for his Patterson and made them, they didn't do very well. So actually, Colt ended up going out of business because of his Colt Pattersons. They just didn't sell right. They were finicky, very expensive to produce, too expensive. Actually, it was so expensive, the U.S. government didn't want anything to do with it, which is kind of shocking, but it was too expensive. So they're like, nah, we'll just stick to our single-shot muskets and pistols. So right after the Texas Revolution, when Texas, I'm a Texan, when we declared our independence from Mexico and won, a couple years down the road, Texas was having some money problems. Well, we happen to have a bunch of these Colt Pattersons in stock in our munition supplies. So if anybody knows history, there was a gentleman named Jack Hayes, or Black Coffee Hayes was his nickname. He was a Texas Ranger. He helped with the Texas Revolution. He was a Texas Ranger, was basically law enforcement. He fought the Comanches in the Comanche War, and I believe he served in the Mexican-American War as well. Well, up until that time, I don't know the particular date, so if you would like to let me know in the comments a specific date. I'm just a little rusty on my history. So about this time, when we're having money problems, Sam Houston basically calls Jack Hayes, come in here, and they had a bunch of Colt Pattersons. So he said, they're yours, take them. We can't use them anywhere else, so take them. He took them, so each soldier or Texas Ranger got a Colt Patterson with a spare cylinder. Now, the Colt Pattersons were, I think the original calibers were like 32s. Reproductions today are 36s, but you get the idea. So they were 5-shot revolvers, not 6. So with the spare cylinder, you now had 10 shots. Problem with reloading was you had to disassemble it. But if you already had the spare cylinder reloaded, it was quick to dump your empty cylinder, put the new one on, and now you got 5 more shots. So they used them, and it worked pretty good. In fact, they fooled the Comanches a lot with their guns. When they would fight them, they would all fire their rifles and their pistols, and the Comanche would assume they're empty, let's charge them. Well, Jack Hayes figured this out, and when the Comanche came and attacked them, they realized real quick that their guns are still shooting, and they had 10 shots. So after your 5th shot, you had to disassemble, take your barrel off. You would basically dump your cylinder or put it in your pocket, get your loaded one. You've got 5 more shots now. Bam, 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 bam. So it was a big hit. Now, problems were that the guns would have parts that would break. Now, they were all interchangeable. If you had another Patterson, you could just take the parts out of it, yada, yada. So, but that was the problem. So you had to disassemble it to reload the cylinders, and they've been known to be gunked up, jam up really fast, get cap jams pretty often. You had your trigger pop down every time you cocked it, so they weren't the most comfortable guns to shoot, but they worked. So let's fast forward here a little bit. So we're right at about, still in Texas history, and we're leading up to the events of the Mexican-American War. Well, there was a gentleman named Samuel Walker, who was also, I believe, a Texas Ranger, and he helped fight in the Mexican-American War. Well, he had heard of Colt Patterson, and I believe he had fired him, used him, and he wanted to make a request. So he basically sent the idea to Colt of the gun he wanted. He wanted a 9-inch long barrel, which some Pattersons were in that, but typically they would have been 7.5. He wanted a 9-inch long barrel. He wanted a built-in loading lever into the gun. He wanted a bigger caliber, and he wanted basically something that could be mounted on the horse. And ta-da, they got together and they created the Colt Walker, or the Walker Colt, depending on how you want to say it. So it was a huge hit. So they made these. So now you had a gun that had a built-in loading lever. You did not have to disassemble it to reload it. So that was a lot easier. Didn't have to worry as much about losing parts or anything like that. You had a extra shot. It was a 6-shot revolver, not a 5-shot. So you had one extra shot. Was a 44. So, compared to a 32, a lot bigger caliber, a lot more damage. And it was a bigger cylinder, so means more powder. The original Colt Pattersons were taking about probably 15 grains of powder. Very weak charge. Could still kill you, do the damage, but very weak. Didn't do a whole lot of damage. And really couldn't reach out there and touch you. This changed that. So the Walker's powder charge was up to 60 grains of powder. Yeah, a hand cannon. And that was all 6 chambers. That was huge. And this was the first gun when they tried prototypes of bullets for pistols, basically. This was kind of the first gun when they started doing that. So this is a major upgrade from the Patterson. So a lot of people are like, if they have a Patterson, they're like, screw that, I want a Walker. Now, there was a lot of battles they were used in. Like I said, they were used in the Mexican-American War. Texas Rangers carried them. Samuel Walker himself carried them. There was a famous battle. I do not know it to mind. If you do know, please leave a comment down below. I should know this, but I'm drawing a blank. A lot to remember. There was a famous battle in the Mexican-American War where Samuel Walker, I believe he was helping with the cannons, and he was killed. Well, when they found his body, he had been fighting with 2 of his pistols he helped Colt design. So kind of created a legend. So he ended up dying with both of his pistols in his hand to the death. So these guns and they're very popular today. So what were maybe some drawbacks? Well, sure. They were big. They worked. They did more damage. They were definitely an upgrade from the Patterson. Were they the best guns? Not exactly. What do I mean by that? So, number one, if you have these reproductions, you might know this right off the bat. When you fire this, odds are the loading lever is going to pop down. And as you can see with this loading lever, there is a spring on the bottom of the barrel. That is what holds the loading lever up. As you can hear it snap into place, that is what holds it. Well, it worked, but it wasn't the strongest spring. So typically every time you would fire it, it would fall down. What happens? That loading lever goes right into a chamber, locks up the gun. So you had to slam it back up, recock it, which drew back your firing rate. And it wasn't the best, but you still had a loading lever to load up your gun. So that was one major issue. Number 2, these guns worked, but they were known to have cap jams quite often. And even with the reproductions right out of the box clean, they will have cap jams fairly often. And that's what they had to do with the originals, or that's what they had to go through with the originals, was cap jams. That gets annoying because especially if you're in a battle, you fire, you're trying to cock your gun. Oh, it's not. So typically they would have had to rotate the cylinder with their opposite hand and cock it at the same time to get it to latch into place. If you're not careful, sometimes a cap would fall into the action. Now your gun can't work, and you would have to disassemble it if you survived the fight to get it back into working order, which some other cap and ball revolvers had that problem too, but this was an early gun. So that would happen. Right as you can see too, if you look at the cylinder, the stoppers in the cylinder are not your normal ones you see on most revolvers today. Now this was a timing issue. So it's basically the stopper or lever, whatever you want to call it. I know there's a specific name, but that's just what I call it. It's just simple. When you cock it, there's a spring that pops up to stop that cylinder to line it up in front of the barrel. What happens if you cock the hammer too fast? If you cock it too fast, especially a well-lubricated gun, it will throw the timing off the cylinder so that lever will pop up, but it has missed the hole. Now your gun's not locked up. So what could happen is misfire more often than not, cap didn't go off, nothing. So you just had to fix that. Or the gun did go off and part of the ball or bullet is being shaved off the barrel and going out the side, which would cause damage to the gun or possible harm to the user. So you can't Josie Wales these guns like he did in the movie. You can't just bam, 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 bam. No, you can't do that with these. You have to cock them normally. Bam, cock it, bam, cock it, bam. It's nothing like in the movies that you see with this gun. So just know that if you get a reproduction, you will have that because it is an exact copy. So that was another problem. So you had to know exactly how to cock it, and I figured it out already just about the 50 shots I put through it. It's just cocking normal. Don't Josie Wales it because you might end up harming the gun over time, and you don't want to do that. So that was another problem. The number one and worst problem of them all, they did not have the steel integrity that we do today. So with that 60 grains of true black powder back in those days, it was common for the cylinders to blow up. Believe it or not, they would actually fracture and blow up. Now you don't have a gun anymore. What do? You get another one pretty much, or you pick up another gun off the battlefield. So that was a major problem. And when they started using bullets, some goobers got the idea of, hey, why don't we put the bullets in upside down to create more gas pressure, and since it's going backwards, it'll do more damage. They were right. But the problem was it was too much pressure. That is also what led to them blowing up. So if you're going to be one of those guys that's, hey, let's put the bullet in backwards, I'm going to stand back there, 911 on hand, and get ready to call them because you're fixing to do something stupid. Now, it might be okay with these reproductions, but don't do anything dumb. Just don't do that. That's not smart. The most I put in my Walker is 50 grains of Pirate XP, or actually 48 grains, so just under 50 grains, which is plenty. Trust me, that's plenty. It fills it up, the chamber, enough for my liking. If you want to use cream of wheat or cornmeal to fill up the rest of the chamber, you can do that too. I've tried that. It does work, and you have a less chance of a chain fire. I don't like doing that. That takes longer to reload, but that is an option if you do decide to do that. Now, this is the Uberti model. Like I said, they've got it printed on the bottom of the barrel. It is an excellent copy and reproduction of the original down to pretty much the last detail. If you compare it to an original, they almost look the same. So Uberti did a great job. Now, my particular model, I told you about the ramrod falling down with 50 grains, nearly 50 grains of powder. It hasn't fallen down yet. Now, I'm sure over time, the more I shoot it, that spring will wear out and it probably will fall down over time. But right now, I haven't had a problem with that. How do you fix that? Well, a lot of guys, if your model is doing that, they would file a step on that spring, so it's like a tooth that grabs your loading lever. Problem is, to get the loading lever down, you have to use two hands, push that spring down, then pull the lever down. If you try to do it by force, you're going to snap that spring in half. Another guy's use is leather, like with the little button that clicks together. That's one guy's do that. Rubber band. Those little wires that you get on I think it's your bread basket. I've seen guys do that. Or simply take the loading lever off and just put it back on when you're reloading. Or simply you deal with it and you just pop that lever back up before you shoot every time. I know that gets annoying, but that's what they had to deal with back then. The mainsprings on these guns, and I've noticed this problem with the Ubertis. Because of that, right out of the box, like I said, you're going to have cap jams, and they're going to get locked up in the frame, which can cause heartache. I put the slick shot nipples on for my last post. I cannot recommend that enough. If you're thinking about getting slick shot nipples for your cap and ball revolvers, highly recommend it. For about 6, it's about 35 to 40 bucks, so a little bit pricey, but it is worth the money. When I took it out and shot it with my number 11 Remington caps, did not have a cap jam, did not have a foul up. Out of 24 shots, it did flawlessly. So I recommend you get that, and just know that if you're looking to get a reproduction. Well, guys, I'm about out of time. Thanks again for joining me for episode 4 of Gun Table Talk, talking about the Walker. I plan to do more pictures and videos of this gun in the future. And as always, guys, I'm the Musket Man, and keep your powder dry. We'll catch you guys in the next episode. Hey guys, Colin Elam again, aka the Musket Man, and I am actually on a part 2 of episode 4. So this is still episode 4. This is just a part 2. I would like to continue talking about the Walker. I ran out of time with my last video, so without further ado, let's continue talking about the Colt Walker. So anyway, guys, if you saw my last post or watched it all the way to the end, we kind of went over the history a little bit, kind of how it really carved the way for Colt and for firearms back in the day, and even guns, how it paved that way to today with guns. So really this episode is going to be talking about how I shoot it and the problems I've seen, what powder charges I like the best, yada yada. So that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about in this episode. So I don't think this video will be 15 minutes, but it might be, I don't know. So anyway, let's continue. So by the end of the video, I got to talking about, all the little problems that go on with it. So I've shot this gun twice, and in a total of 48 rounds I have fired through it. So it's still a fairly new gun. So things that I've learned. So the factory nipples that come with this gun, and it is a Uberti model, and it is an excellent copy of the Colt Walker, but it has some of the problems that the originals had that a lot of shooters probably wouldn't like. So what I found out about the factory nipples, do they work? Absolutely, they work on a lot of my Piettas and my other Ubertis. They do work. Problem is, I've learned with this Walker, it does not like CCI number 11s or number 10s. I've tried both. It does not work well with them. You have plenty of misfires that will seat the percussion cap on the nipple, but not fire it, so you have to re-spin the cylinder to finally get it to go off. That's not very practical. So they don't like those. I also have the Italian-made percussion caps that I've had great luck in the past with my other guns. On the Walker, they still don't like this particular gun. What they did like was the Remington number 10s or the 11s. Typically, the number 11s work best for me. It just depends on what style gun you're using and what size you like the best. The Remington number 11s worked the best. So that is with the factory nipples. When I fired them, didn't have any misfires. Gun fired well. Didn't have any misfires, just like from the CCI caps or the Italian-made ones. But what did I figure out? And I discussed this in the last episode, is the gun cap jammed pretty much after every shot. So it would fire without hesitation, or a hang fire or anything like that. When you go to cock it again, it would get locked up because that cap would fall into the action that I had to use my offhand to rotate the cylinder while I'm cocking it. So I had to do that almost every single time. And that's not practical, but they did have to deal with that back in the days with the originals. Now, I'm a more practical shooter and a historical shooter. I don't really like that much. I want it to function like more of a, maybe more well-made cap and ball revolver or a standard revolver. That's what I wanted. So what was the issue for causing a lot of these cap jams? Well, there's actually two issues. I have noticed on these Uberti model guns, whether it's the Walker or the 51 Navy or the Dragoon series sometimes. Not all the Dragoon series, but some of them. What I've realized is these mainsprings are not the strongest. In fact, this mainspring is not even held in with the screw. In fact, you used your grip from your hand to take it off. Like it's held in with the hook. So it's not the strongest. It works, but it's not the strongest. So what happens is when you cock the gun, when you get it, and you can hear it, I mean, there was almost no effort to cock that. So what happens is when you cock that and you fire it, as that cap goes off, there is blowback from the burning powder. Because it's a weak spring, it blows back the hammer, see, just enough to where that cap can fall into the action, or down into your hammer to where you don't even have a cap go off or anything like that with your next shot. So that is a problem that some of these have from that, because it's not a strong mainspring. Most of my Piettas, I don't think I've ever had that problem. It's really with the Ubertis. So I don't know if they're just trying to make it exact copy. Maybe they are, or maybe they just, they have some work they need to do on their mainsprings. But that is a problem I've heard with most Uberti guns, not just the Walker. So, that is the number one problem. Well, in order to fix that, if you're a gunsmith, you'd probably have to take it off, re-harden that mainspring. And the problem is, if you're one of those professionals that can do that, problem is it's going to be pretty dang hard to get that spring back on to the gun. And it might be too heavy where the gun doesn't function correctly. So there's not a whole lot of room you can do with that. I've heard of guys filing the edges of these mainsprings to get rid of their sharp edge to make a round one. That will help strengthen it up so there's not as many weak spots, and it's more strong and true to its spring. So that's another thing you could do. You just got to be careful and really know what you're doing. So number two problem. They're standard factory nipples. They have nothing special about them. I think they're probably $6 to $8 for 6. They're easy to replace. They're not anything fancy. What have I heard? And I've talked about this in my previous episodes and previous posts. If you've watched a lot of YouTube videos or been shooting a lot of cap and ball revolvers, you have heard of slick shot nipples. So I'd known about them for years, slick shot nipples. And every video, every bit of research I've done, everybody swears on them. They swear they work. And I've seen plenty of videos of different YouTubers using them, and they seem to work. So I thought I would try it out with my Walker to see if it would help with some of those issues. Now, like I said in my previous post, it was about $35, not counting shipping, for just 6 of these stainless steel slick shot nipples. And what's so great about them? Well, if you look inside of them down the nipple, they're actually wider than the factory ones are. So that allows more flame from that bust cap to go down into that little pinhole. Plus, the pinhole is just a hair bigger. It is probably one size bigger. In fact, when I was loading this, I saw 1 or 2 grains actually fall out of the nipple when I was loading this gun. Now, don't worry, that doesn't mean anything's wrong. When you pack that down, it's not going to happen. It was just because it was loose powder. So it was enough for a little grain to just fall, 1 or 2. So not a big deal. Another deal is, there's 2 holes in the side of the nipple. So what that does when the cap goes off, it basically blows the nipple outward, or the cap outwards like this, versus 100% back. So it gets rid of some of that blowback from like a factory one. It lowers that pressure to where it's not going to move your hammer back as much to allow the cap to fall into the action. So it helps with that. So I thought, well, all I can do is buy it and test them out. So I bought them, installed them, easily to install, just like any other factory nipple that you buy. Easy to disassemble, yada, yada. So I was like, all right, we got it installed. We'll go shoot it this weekend. So I actually took it out to shoot, and my father-in-law actually bought his first cap and ball revolver. It was his first black powder gun, so that was a fun experience to get to do that with him, kind of introduce him to the black powder world, and to get to try out the Walker, and he got to shoot it as well. We both had a blast. So loaded up the gun the same way, powder, patch, ball, or wad and ball, capped them. Now, I tried it again with the CCI caps to see if that was the problem. They still misfired. It still would go click, cock, click, clock, click. I had to set all of the caps, then they all fired the next go-around. Well, you don't want to do that if you're hunting with this, or you want to be practical with it. That's just not realistic. So it didn't work. Tried the Italian-made ones. Still had problems. It did fire and work, but I had a lot of misfires. So I was like, okay, last chance, third time's charm. I used the Remington number 11 caps. I don't have the 10s. That's all I had. This gun performed flawlessly with those. So it likes the Remington number 11s, which in my opinion are the best ones on the market that you can get. When I would fire it, recock it, that cap would basically roll off to the side versus getting into the action, so it didn't lock up. I think out of 24 shots, I had to rotate the cylinder one time with my offhand. That's just from cap and ball revolvers. That's going to happen. But I only had to do it one time out of 24. Before I got the nipples, I had to do it pretty much 24 out of 24 times. So that's not practical and not fun. These performed flawlessly. They did a fantastic job, exactly what they meant to do. Now, it may change with different guns on your different style of caps, but what I've discovered is the Remington number 11s perform the best on the Walker, especially with the slick shot nipples. And as you can see, I said they're stainless steel, so they stand out pretty well on the gun, as you can see, versus your factory ones. I think it gives it more character like that. It looks pretty cool. And as you shoot it, they're going to get tarred up anyway with black powder fouling. So, if you were looking or thinking about getting one of these, or you've had the problems that I've been describing, I can't recommend them enough. They do exactly what the YouTuber said they would do, and all the research you've done, they do exactly what the company promised they would do. So highly recommend them, especially if you own a Walker. So, other than that, let's go over powder charges. And I'm getting to run out of time, so I better hustle. Powder charges. As you can see, this is a massive cylinder, even compared to the Dragoons, which I don't have. It is in my safe. This is massive. Like I said in the last video, the max powder charge was 60 grains. Don't load this with 60 grains. Even though it can, if you want to do an experiment maybe, okay, it won't hurt it. But if you repeatedly do 60 grains, you are going to wear out the wedge and the barrel and the frame to this gun out of maybe a couple hundred shots. I don't recommend doing it. You will wear out the gun. And like I said in the last video, the originals were known to blow up because of that. Now, steel integrity is way better on these guns. You don't have to worry about them blowing up unless you're using like smokeless powder, which you never do in a black powder gun. So, 60 grains is too high. What can you do? Well, I've tested it with 40 grains of Pirate XP powder and 20 grains of cornmeal. It does work, and it lessens your chance of a chain fire from the front. What's the problem with that? It takes quite a bit longer to reload that gun. You basically have to have two different flasks, one with powder, one with cornmeal. It takes a lot longer to reload, but it does work if you decide to do that. That way you're using a lower powder charge and you're filling the rest of the chamber. So that's a way you want to go if you want to do that. What works for me, I have discovered. I load just under 50 grains. It's actually 48 grains of Pirate X powder, which gets pretty high up into that cylinder even when it's loose. So what I do is I put the wad to get up more space, and on top, put a ball on top of that. Now, there's about probably a 1/4 inch left of gap in that cylinder, but honestly, I don't see a difference. This gun shoots about 1 inch high, and it is point of aim. I was knocking still targets at 20 yards, two-handed because it is a heavy gun. No problem at all. I think I missed one shot out of 24. So that's pretty good. So that worked for me. You may want to do 30 grains with cornmeal, or 50 grains, or 20 grains and the rest cornmeal. It doesn't matter. You just don't want your ball all the way back into that cylinder, because your accuracy will suffer, and after so many shots, your barrel will wear incorrectly. So you don't want to do that. As long as you get it close enough to the end of the cylinder, you shouldn't have any problems. Number two, a lot of these have, or three actually, a lot of these have the problem of the loading lever falling down. Like I said in my last video, mine hasn't fallen down yet, and I think it's just because it's a new gun. I'm sure over time it will wear out and start to do that. So, I know with 60 grain powder charge, the odds are that loading lever is going to come down every time, but with 48 grains I've seen, it stays up there. It won't fall down. Like I said, over time it probably will get weakened where I'll have to replace it, or maybe zip tie it or something to keep it up, or just simply take it off. But that is one of the many problems they had to do with these guns back in the day. Well, guys, I'm about to run out of time. This was more going over what I do for the range and going over the slick shot nipples. I'm Colin Elam, a.k.a. the Musket Man, and thank you for joining me in part 2 of episode 4 of Gun Table Talk. We will catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.